All right, so I am getting ready to install a remote starter in a 2009 Mini Cooper. So I got all the bits and pieces here. I think what I want to do before that is just talk a little bit about. I'm just going to talk a little bit about remote starters in general. This is actually something I know something about because I've done quite a few of these now. Big fan. I live up in the frozen North Country, so, well, northern part of the United States anyway. So, basically, car electronics or electrical systems in general. So, basically, everything is happening at the key. So, generally, at the key, you've got an off, right? An accessory, an ignition, and a start. So off is fairly self-evident, right? So about the only thing that's powered there is generally going to be there's going to be a hot to the clock function on the radio. Also in the off position, the modules are going to be powered to supply all the stuff that works when your car is off. So the remote locks, stuff like that. Under accessory, generally speaking, is just going to be the radio and anything that's powered during the off. Well, sometimes. Sometimes when you switch to accessory, it cuts off the power locks and stuff like that. But accessory is generally just going to be the radio. Okay, off of ignition, we're going to be powering everything that's running when the car is running. So, everything, right? So, everything. And then start, obviously, fairly simple. You're just engaging the starter. So what all these remote starters do, which this is the module here, this little guy, what all the remote starters do is when you hit the button, they they parallel all these circuits, and they trigger them. So generally, and I'll kind of go over the general wiring here as I go, or once I get down the line. But basically, you're going to be paralleling the accessory, the ignition, and the start circuit, and this computer is going to power each one of those circuits in its respective, when it's supposed to be powered, right? So after we start, we'll bring on the accessory. Generally, most of them, after we start, or we'll turn on the ignition, and then we'll hit the starter, fire up the engine, keep it going for a certain amount of time. So all we're doing is paralleling these three circuits. Now, there's a couple other functions that these things will do when they're running, or a couple other things that they need. So the really big one is the immobilizer. So completely separate from this circuit, the immobilizer, when the car starts, it's part of the computer for the engine. It looks for the chip in the key. So in the case of this thing, well, I got the keys for my truck here. There's a chip embedded in this key, and it, radio frequency detects this chip, and it disables, I guess would be the way to say it, disables the immobilizer. And the immobilizer just shuts down the engine. So if the computer, the engine computer, they usually call it an ECU, engine control unit, does not receive a signal from the chip when it's in there, it will engage the immobilizer and it will just shut down the engine. Some of them, even the more advanced ones I've heard, I've never really run into this, maybe the case on this Mini Cooper. If you engage the immobilizer, it completely locks down the car until you have to tow it to a dealer basically and get it reset. I've heard that. I don't know if that's actually true. I guess I'm going to find out. Hopefully we're not making any tows to the dealer at any point. Okay, so in addition to that, there's usually provisions to do some extra stuff with these boxes. And once I kind of pull out the wiring, I'll go into that. But one of the things you can do is you can power the rear defrost, or engage the rear defrost. You could roll down the windows if you had an accessory function. This one I'm just going with a single push button start. Also in this one, you'll be able to lock and unlock the doors, all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's talk about inputs. So the remote starter, yeah. Okay, so the remote starter is going to parallel each one of these circuits, right? So it's going to give you power to ignition and to start. Easy enough, right? Now, as a side note, most of them will give you the option on the accessory whether or not you want to power them. And basically the only thing that's on the accessory is the radio. So I actually usually disable the accessory because all my cars, there's Bluetooth on the radio. So I don't want the radio to power up because it'll try to connect to my phone. And if I get a phone call or something like that, it won't work. So it's nice when I get in there and I put in the key, the radio boots up, connects to my phone, all of that. Now the remote starter is going to need some inputs here. So one of the first things, so first off, we've got some safeties, right? So we've got a neutral safety. Okay, so the neutral safety is going to tell us when the car's in neutral or park, right? All my vehicles are manual, so I'm actually gonna have to build a neutral safety switch for this, which I've got this little proximity sensor. I'm probably gonna do a video on how I make this work, but these things are cool, they're cheap, and basically the shifter, I'm gonna build the device. I'm probably gonna tap a hole in the bottom of the shifter that will hang out when the shifter is in the neutral position and engage the sensor, and only let the remote start engage when the car's in neutral. Obviously, if it tried to engage while it was in gear, that'd be a big problem. Also, there's generally a brake shut off. So if you step on the brake, it will shut off the car. Sometimes you've also got a parking brake, or you can. And then there's going to be a manual switch. So there's going to be an on-off switch. And these are also called a service switch, right? So they give you these stickers to go with it. Stickers. Oh, here we go. Warning in several languages. This vehicle is equipped with a directed remote start system. And this system may attempt to restart the vehicle when the battery is reconnected, or if a signal is sent via smartphone transmitter. Prior to servicing the vehicle, check with its owner to determine whether the hood detection switch has been installed. So I usually, clean up and put this under there in case someone's working on it in the future. And then I usually just put an on-off switch near the key, which I got this little guy to do that. Got this little guy, and it's just an on-off switch, just a latching on-off switch. And I may or may not use the LED that's in it to either indicate when the switch is on, or I could wire it through so that the little switch is red when the neutral safety is engaged and the system is on, something like that. That might be kind of annoying though, because it'll be flashing, so I'd have to put a feature in there so that it would only work when the car is off. So basically when the whole system is armed, this little thing will illuminate red, and that'll tell you that the system is good to go. Could do something like that. I haven't quite made up my mind yet on what I'm going to do. Okay, so the other inputs that we're going to have are for the remote starter itself. It's going to need a tach signal, so a tachometer. It needs to know whether or not the engine's running. This is generally achieved, all these new systems can hook up to the CAN bus, which is the computer, or the car's kind of onboard computer system. So basically, you've got a module, which I think is going to be this guy. It's either this guy or this guy. I'll know once I start getting into the directions here. Oops, just dropped something. I'll know when I start getting into the directions here what helps if you keep stuff in the bag. Which module it is. I want to say this guy is going to be the guy that interfaces with the CAN bus, and then it communicates with the remote starter to let it know when the engine is running. We're also going to have a few. So I guess we were talking about the rear defroster a second ago. So under outputs, You can wire in an output to run the remote or the rear defroster. I generally don't do that because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get it to work right. I've actually never really gotten one to work right. I could just put a relay in there and make it kick on and off. There's also, most of these have what's called an anti-grind. And basically what that does is you can put a relay to make it so that the key start position doesn't work. So you can't accidentally engage the starter. So you've got an anti-grind. Let's see, what other outputs do you have? Let me think. I think it's, parking lights. So it'll send an output to the parking lights, which just, blinks them when you hit the key fob and also turns them on when the car is actually running. And there's all kinds of other stuff you can do too. They usually give you a few extra wires to play with that you can either use to power other modules or to power extra stuff. Like if you wanted to turn on the heated seats or, like I said, roll down windows or whatever you want to do, you can make it do it. So let's kind of go through the general process that I go through with these systems. So the first thing I do is actually pull out the directions, and I pull out all the wiring harnesses, and I actually go through and I get rid of anything that I'm not going to use. I pull out anything I'm not going to use. So let's see. So this is the remote starter. So I'm going to go through and just cross out on the list here anything that I'm not going to need. Let's see, I'm going to need this. Second ignition, I probably won't need that. So I'll put a line through that. High current input, got 2 of those. Accessory output, we'll wire that in so it's an option. Starter output and ignition 1 output. So we got 2 12-volt inputs, which we're just going to tap off of there. And so the only one we're going to drop out of this wiring harness is the pink wire. So we'll get all these ready to go. So this is the main harness that I was talking about that's going to parallel the main circuits, your starter circuits and all that. So I've got a special set of tools. So these little guys are relatively inexpensive, and they're just a set of terminal tools here. They make it a little easier to take these things apart rather than trying to do it with a screwdriver. So we're going to drop the pink and white. All right, so we got this one done. So I set all these extra wires aside just because sometimes these little connectors come in handy. So this wiring harness is done. So we're going to be using all these wires. So go through and get rid of whatever you don't need is generally the first step. Okay, so next we've got the 9-pin. Okay, so in this 9-pin, we're probably not going to need the factory rearm. Probably not going to need that. We're probably going to need the disarm. Let's see, activation input. I'm not going to use the anti-grind in this one, so we can pull out the orange. We're going to need the horn output. Oh, yeah, that's something I forgot. So on the outputs, you've also got the horn. So basically, it can toot the horn when you're doing programming functions and stuff like that. So that's on there as well. And also outputs the alarm. So obviously, alarm. You want it to disable the alarm when you do that. And also on the outputs would be the locks. So back to this. Anyway. All right. So chassis ground, we're going to need that. White, horn, trunk release, we're not going to need that. So we're going to need the disarm. We're going to need ignition out to alarm. We might need that yellow. The white and blue activation input, I'm not sure if we're going to need that yet, so I'm going to leave that in. I'll kind of know as I get further along. So we can pull out the red and white. Okay, so this guy's all good to go. So that's all we're going to need. We might also be losing the white and blue. So it's starting to look more manageable already. Okay, now we have got, this is the 5-pin. So the tachometer should be coming off should be coming through. This has like a serial bus that it connects to. They call it D2D. So the tach should be coming through that. The parking brake input, yeah, we'll keep that because we might use that as a safety or something. The brown, we're going to keep. The gray, oh, yeah, that's right. There's a hood. They use a hood switch as well as a safety switch. So if the hood's open, it disables the remote starter. Generally, I use this as a safety of some sort. And then the blue and white second status rear defogger, we're going to go ahead and drop that for now. So we'll pull all these wires out. While I'm doing this, sometimes these wires are a little bit of a pain. So I have always used these Avital remote starts, and really the only reason is they're the cheapest ones out there on the market for the number of features you get. Actually, I think they're just the cheapest ones. They seem to work pretty good. I've had them in, I think this will be like the 5th vehicle, at least, that I've put one in, unless there's something I'm forgetting about. Come on. These little guys can be a pain. I've never really had problems with them. They don't have a whole lot in the way of bells and whistles and all that. You know, they basically just, you push the button and they fire up, which is really all I needed to do. So, but, you know, like the Vipers and some of the other ones have some nice features where they will, all right. They will have like two-way communication and stuff like that, so you can see on the remote that the car is running. I found that for me, for the applications that I'm doing, generally speaking, I'm where I can see the vehicle. So it doesn't really matter that much to me what's going on. You know, I can look out there and, you know, visually verify that the car is running after I hit the button. There are a plethora of websites online that will give you wiring diagrams to do remote starters. You can print them off anywhere. I mean, just type it into Google. You can find the usual suspects. But here's the list for this car, an 09 Cooper. It tells you where all the different things are. So basically, you're just going to match up, you know, these things with this for the most part. Now, there's some stuff that's a little different. As I go through this, I'll try and point those out a little bit. And this will be pretty much true for all remote starters that you're going to deal with in all cars. So this little satellite harness is this guy right here, this little 4-pin. This is generally like the extra wires that they give you to do stuff. Sometimes you use the status output for one of the other modules, which we'll get into here in a second. But generally speaking, this is just for like extra stuff. So starter and ignition. So like if you had something that you wanted to come on with the ignition, you could hook a relay to this and do whatever you want. Roll down windows, open something, turn on lights, whatever you wanted to do, you could do with that input. The only one we might need is the status. So for now, I'm going to drop these other three. Okay, and then the last wiring harness is going to be the lock-on-lock. And it lists 3 wires, or it's a 3-pin connector, but they don't use this middle pin. I don't know why they don't make it a 2-pin, but whatever. I just work here. All right. I don't actually work here. I'm at home. But anyway, this is the lock-on-lock, so we're going to get to that here in a little bit. All right, so we've got this ready to go. The next thing we're going to pull up is the directions, which I forgot, for the vehicle-specific stuff. So, I will be back. Real quick before I go on here, so just real quick, some of the tools that I like using. So these little guys are real handy, these little terminal connectors. You're gonna need, a bunch of these type of things for removing body panels. They're cheap. Break them, buy another one. I mean, they're, break these, don't break the body panels. These have obviously been through the war. But I just buy these, and as I break them, I chuck them, or use them for whatever. I chuck them and get new ones, But you're gonna need a bunch of these, just all shapes and sizes. Like I said, they're pretty cheap. So obviously, you're gonna need a decent set of test leads. a couple sets of test leads. So I've got test leads here, some stuff that I've made, and this, that, and the other for various projects, and a decent multimeter that you trust, or multimeter, either one. I can go back there. Solder, that's big. I like butane soldering irons for these jobs. Yeah, butane soldering iron's nice. They're cheap. They get nice and hot, nice and quick. You can also kind of use the little ports here to kind of cook down heat shrink and stuff like that. So that comes in really, really handy because you don't want to run any more wires than you need. Also, these little butt splice connectors are freaking fantastic. So basically the way they work is you put the wires in between here, and you can hit it with another tool that I would recommend, a heat gun that is a long cylinder like this. You don't want like a trigger type one because you can't get into little tiny spaces with it. These things are cheap too, like 20 bucks. And actually, I have not tried this thing yet to see if it will work with these little splice connectors. Normally, I hit them with the soldering iron, which is, works okay. But we're gonna plug her in and see how she runs here. So to that end, again, these wire stripper things are freaking fantastic. I can't recommend them enough. They make life so much easier. So these little guys, you just slide the wire in like so. It's a little easier when it's not in a loop like this. But just get the wires so that they're centered up beneath the solder. And hopefully I don't burn the crap out of myself here. There we go, solder's starting to flow. There we go. Melt down these two ends here. So the other nice thing about the heat gun is it doesn't put a lot of heat into the wire, but you can see there that it melted that solder pretty good. And these little splice connectors are cheap, and they work fantastic. I mean, it's just way better than trying to do a lineman splice, especially when you're in a tight little area or anything. But this wire is barely even warm. I'm gonna go ahead and hang this guy up and let him cool. But yeah, so that makes a really nice little connection. Really big fan of these guys. Let's see, what other little tools can I show you that make this way easier? I think that's the vast majority of what you're going to need. I mean, you're going to need a razor blade to kind of do some side splicing and stuff like that. I can show you side splicing. I don't think I'm actually going to videotape very much of the actual remote starter install because it takes about twice as long for me to accomplish anything when I'm videotaping, and this is already probably going to be a 2-day job. It's no small thing. So I probably won't videotape, but I'll kind of show you some of the intermittent steps there anyway. All right, I got to go print off the rest of the paperwork for everything, and then we'll come back and we will look at everything else. I'll be back. Oh, so one other thing I'd like to mention, they come in really handy, and they're really relatively inexpensive, and they're not that hard to use once you kind of figure out how they work. You can get all kinds of assorted sizes of these do-it-yourself connectors. Now this one's screwed up because when they repackaged it, they put the little red plastic retaining thing in there, which is really freaking annoying. It's almost impossible to get out. You don't want to put them in until you put the pins in. But these little things are just little like Molex connectors, I guess, basically. But they come with all the pins and everything, and you can crimp them just with a pair of pliers. However, the crimp tools for them are relatively inexpensive, like $20 or so, which mine, who knows where it got to. But I'll probably end up using some of these. If I think about it, I'll do a little video showing how to assemble these. They're really easy to assemble. But these things come in handy. You can get them, you know, all the way up to like 6 or 7 pins, I think, and all the way down to 1 pin. And they're really, really nice, you know, if you want to make some quick disconnects for whatever. Also, electrician's tape. You know, get the good stuff. Don't cheap out. You know, get the slightly more expensive stuff. It works a lot better. And also the silicone wrap stuff is fantastic. You can wrap up all, you know, the wires. It works just like electrical tape, but it doesn't get all gunky over time like electrical tape does. But this stuff, you know, have enough of that on hand to do whatever you need to do. Obviously, a crap ton of zip ties, all sizes and shapes and assortments and that, you know, this, that, and the other. Nylon ones are better. They hold up better over time as opposed to the cheap plastic ones. You know, I've got some cheap plastic ones in here, but I've got a bunch of nylon ones mixed in as well. And also this channel for running wires. You want to make your install as clean as you can. This stuff's cheap, comes in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. Well, actually, all of them are round. It only comes in different sizes. Yeah, you can, you know, kind of clean up your wire bundles and kind of give you some extra chafing protection in there. You can also put some baby powder on it, but this seems to actually hold up a little better than the baby powder for chafing. Wires, anyway. That's a pretty bad joke. Anyway, so this stuff, you know, this, I can't remember what it's called. Wire channel stuff, things, something. Yeah, that comes in handy too. All right, so the part of this install that is unique to me is this is a push button start vehicle. You push a button and it starts. It doesn't actually have a key. So we've got this special interface. So these interfaces are, they call them like convenience interfaces. So you don't have to like fabric cobble something together yourself. So we've got this guy, which I bought off eBay, which they don't actually make anymore. And these ribbon cables make me nervous because if you twist or tweak them, they do not worky. So, just do the idiot check here. So, Mini Cooper 2009, so that's good. Let's see, requires DLPK or KBIM. I'm looking up here. So this is hardware version 2. So that's 1.1. No, that's for the DLPK. So it doesn't really say which one you need or which version. So hopefully version 2 is going to work. Don't know. All right, so now we do the exact same thing that we did before with this. Since I bought this used on eBay, well, we're going to go through the wiring harnesses and take out what we don't need. So hopefully they sent me all the wiring harnesses that I needed when I bought this on eBay. They don't make this module anymore. Directed, which I think is the company that makes all this stuff, the express kits and stuff like that, has stopped supporting guys like you and me that are doing this in their garage. They just have stopped supporting us. They don't make any money off of us. So I don't really know if there's another company that makes these products, but they're getting harder and harder to come by. And the cars are getting more and more complicated. So, you know, I don't know. Okay, so this is going to be the communication cable, the D2D cable, which is kind of the serial connector, which is going to run between this and this DLPK module, which we'll pull out here in a second. All right. So that's all right. We'll keep that in the baggie. And I've got this module left over from I don't know what, so I'm going to take that out for the time being and set it someplace where it won't get confused. All right, what else we got here? All right, so we've got, okay, so this is this guy. So we're gonna need pink, we got that, black. So these are gonna go to the ignition here. Got a brake input, which is brown black, so we're gonna use that. Got a second one that goes to brown. Okay. Got orange black. We're gonna use that. We've got orange. Looks like we're gonna use that. And then we've got a pink and white, or just pink, which it doesn't look like we're gonna use. So I think we can pull that one out. Okay, so that harness is all ready to go. So this DLPK module, which we're gonna pull out, and we'll get the wires ready to go for that. All right, so this guy, we've got a serial connector that is going to go between these two guys. Now this is going to get interesting. Yeah, there is. Okay, cool. So we'll be able to wire all three of these units together for the serial connector, because we're going to have three different modules here. So we'll be able to hook this guy in as well. So all three of these will be able to talk to each other, which eliminates a lot of wiring, because you can, yeah, it just eliminates a ton of wiring, as you're about to see as I pull all the wires apart. We got two different wiring harnesses here. We're going to be dropping a lot. So these modules work for multiple different vehicles. So, you know, they give you plenty of wires so you can do whatever application you need. Which is going to be the TAC input. That's interesting. One would have thought that that would have come off the... Oh, that's going to the TAC. Okay, so we are going to need the TAC on the remote starter afterwards, or after all. And we've got pink. We're keeping that. And that's it. So the rest of these wires we can drop. So you can see, I mean, people get intimidated by this stuff, but we're really only using 3 wires off of this thing. So I'm going to pop out all these wires, and I will be right back. Okay, so here's the last of the wires there. Oh, we got one more harness to do. Okay, and what we're left over with is all the wires that we're going to have to put in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and plug everything in. And I'm going to start kind of trying to get a feel for how all this is going to be wired together. Now, I'm not going to actually solder anything until it's in the car, because I don't know where these modules are going to end up, and obviously you want, you know, shorter wires is better. So, and obviously the limiting factor is going to be this little serial cable here. And you don't really want to screw with these because it is a digital connection. So it's kind of risky soldering in extra wires, because you just don't know, you know, if it's going to screw up with the ones and zeros flowing through there, you know. So this is not looking too bad. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I can get these remotes out of the way for the time being. I'm going to go ahead and hook together any wires that are going to be hooked together. I'm just going to zip tie them together, or maybe just tie them together so that I can kind of keep track of where they are. So between this guy and... okay. So between this guy and this guy, I'm going to have the TAC. So we can just reinsert the wire here. Okay. Now we can definitely trim this a bit, because we know that it's not going to be anywhere near this long, simply because this serial cable is pretty short. So I'm still going to give myself, I'm still going to give myself a healthy amount, but I'm going to cut that just to get rid of some of the bird's nest that I'm dealing with here. Okay, these two guys, the violet and the violet, are going to go together. So we'll just tie a square knot on there. Again, we're going to cut off these wire ends, so I'm not worried about, you know, kinking the wire or anything. So those two are going to go together. Right? And then the rest of these are good for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to coil them, and I'm going to put a cheap zip tie on them just to get to, again, you know, bird's nest. It's easier to keep track of it if you're not just dealing with a giant bird's nest of stuff. So once I get into the vehicle, basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break these wire bundles apart. You know, I'm kind of trying to clean them up as much as I can. Once I get into the vehicle, I'm going to start breaking these wire bundles apart one at a time. And I'm just going to wire them in basically one, you know, like I'll do all of these wires, double, triple check them, make sure they're all good, and then go on from there. Just to, you know, you try and break it down into simple pieces and just very carefully follow the wiring diagrams and double and triple check your work. If you start to get tired, come back to it later. Take a break, call it a day, and come back to it later, because it's really easy to screw this up, and it's very difficult to go back and retrace your work. So always just go slow, you know, watch the wiring diagrams, double, triple check the color codes on the wires whenever you can. Double check that, you know, with your meter, verify that it actually is what it is. So, you know, like the parking brake, verify that, verify the ignition circuit, verify the accessory circuit, all that kind of stuff. So just take your time, do it slow. You know, that's just my general advice with this stuff. It's not rocket surgery, even though it looks pretty bad. Trust me, it's nowhere near as bad as it looks. And I think this pretty much does us here. So this is pretty much how I prep for all of this. From here, it's really just a matter of following the wiring diagrams. So like all this stuff, you know, about the brake pedal and wiring in these wires correctly, you just got to take your time and do it real easy. And then just matching up what wire is going to go where with all this. I kind of go through the same process with this guy and eliminate anything I don't need. I'm kind of trying to speak in generalities about this process. I'm not really going to do one. Like I said, it's a lot of work to film and do this stuff. So, and it's already going to be a 2-day project. I'd kind of like to get it done. So basically at that point, you're basically just matching up all the different stuff with what you need. So you're going to be matching up, you know, factory alarms, stuff like that. I'll probably come back and talk about the lock and unlock wires, because there's type A, type B, type C. I'll pull up a wiring diagram and kind of show you how that works, because that's going to be something that I always have to look that up every time, how those work. But anyway, hopefully this gives you at least a little insight and makes it, I know it looks very unintimidating right now, right? Just the giant's bird's nest of wires. And that's not even all the wires. But anyway, hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into how it works. It's like I said, it's not rocket surgery. It's not too complicated. You know, you can figure it out. If you've done any sort of electronics before, it's not too hard. Just take your time, solder all your connections. Use these butt splices whenever you can. Solder butt splices to make better connections. You know, you'll see videos where guys side splice wires. I go ahead and throw some solder on there as well, just to make it a little bit better of a connection. That's a good idea. But that's about it. So hopefully this was helpful. You know, let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to cover. I'll probably cover like a few of the little steps of this, but I'm not going to film the whole thing start to finish. It's just, you know, it would be 8 hours of film that I'd have to go back and edit. So, yeah, let me know if you got any questions. But in the meantime, thanks for watching.